Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday Morning. I'm one of your hosts, Katie Halper.
I'm the other host, Maté.
And make sure that you guys know that, well, first of all, make sure you like this stream because we would really like it if you did. But also after this, we will be taking some of your questions at Callin. Callin is a free app. You can just download it onto your phone. And now, whether you have Droid or an iPhone, and we'll be discussing more of what we discuss here, and we'll be taking your questions and calls. And the link to that is in the description for this video. So without any further ado, as people know, this is Monday morning, which is when we react to the Sunday morning news shows that we watch so that you don't have to. Also, this week, we just want to tell you we are, Wilson is not here. So we're taking the week off, but because we love you so much, we're not leaving you stranded. And so what we're doing is we are unlocking a previously Substack only interview with Oliver Stone. And he's, of course, in the news quite a bit right now because the documentary that he produced and did the interviews for, Ukraine on Fire, has been removed from Substack. So we got your back. And Substackers, Substack only people, well, we'll get your back again next week.
Yeah, and we got your back by even being here this morning without our producer, Matt Wilson. Yeah, we are exposed. Right. We're vulnerable. We're doing this without him, and it's difficult, but we'll do our best.
Yeah, we're going to
bring you the Monday morning content that you count on.
Yeah. And also, make sure you check out the great Substack only material that we released this past week. Great stuff with Abby Martin. And also the stuff that you love to hate. You love to see it. You hate to see it, which is Aaron Maté responding to the latest rounds of vicious attacks against him by the Young Turks. And next week, I'm sure we're going to have even more.
Hear their voices. We'll do another response.
Yeah.
Should we get to it?
Yeah, let's
Should we
get
mourn?
to it.
Is it time to mourn?
Yeah,
should we get our
Monday morning on? Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
All right, so here we go. So we have our first clip comes to us from the land of course, Meet the Press. And Aaron, why don't you tell us about who this person is that we're about to see? And let me just do a screen share.
So the Chuck Todd at Meet the Press is turning to a guy named Clint Watts, who says he's a former FBI agent. I don't know exactly what he did at the FBI, but he basically, during the Russiagate era, he's emerged as one of the key pundits calling out the power of Russian bots. That was his big thing. He's written all these studies via shady think tanks and constantly on MSNBC warning us about the invasion of Russian bots. And now all of a sudden, this kind of blew my mind. He appears on Meet the Press, and now he's sort of acting as a military expert, looking at the battlefield in Ukraine and tracking the progress of infantry. And I just love how he's gone from Russian bot mania to Ukraine war expert. So we'll see what he has to say.
Yeah, so let's see what he has to say. Also, he has he has, as you'll see, he has that kind of meteorologist thing going on. All right.
Clint Watts has been studying the war, deconstructing Russia.
Could you hear it when I was doing it?
I can hear. Now, let me know. Does the audience hear an echo when Chuck speaks?
Yeah, let me hold on. Let me put it on the short. Hold on, this should be better now. Hold on. Tell me if this works.
Russia's military strategy for us here at NBC.
Could you hear that? Aaron?
Yes.
Clint Watts has been studying the war, deconstructing Russia's military strategy for us here at NBC News. He joins me now. So, Clint, what do you discern a new strategy here, military strategy by the Russians, increased use of missile strikes from farther away, and it appears to be at least a stalling of their ground invasion, if you will?
That's right, Chuck. This is clearly in phase 2, which is reorganize, consolidate, bring forces back together, take some of their armor units, by the way. Some of these armor units that you see up here in and around Sumy were nearly decimated. And so they're bringing them back, reorganizing them, patching together all those armor units, putting new commands on it so they can make another advance. Separately, the east is really where the fight is happening right now. You've seen major battles in and around Kharkiv. Not only there, they're moving in 2 directions, essentially trying to link up in and around an area known as Izium. Izium, if they can do this, would link together all of this territory here. And what Vladimir
Looks like an
Putin has said
alien.
from the start is that he wants all of Donbass to be essentially secured in Russian. Separately, this is Mariupol, where you're seeing the absolute devastation. And the bigger story, I think, is where they're focusing in the south. They know in Kyiv it's going to get tough. And one thing to add to all of this, Chuck, is it is becoming mud season, meaning that when you look at some of the things that are going on in the east, as these bogs thaw out, you see tanks stuck in the mud. You see convoys stuck in the mud. So for them, they, I think, see, hey, it may be too much to get to Kyiv. Let's focus on the south, which is the bigger picture, I think, at this point. The land bridge has essentially been secured, connecting Crimea and this Donbass region. Okay. Separately, Mykolaiv, that's where the very devastating missile strike was overnight.
Yep.
They're going to try and go here and encircle Odessa. That's the next fight to watch.
All right, Clint Watts, who's been studying this for us. Clint, thank you.
Ooh, okay. Do you want me to go back or?
Why is he wearing the Apple earbud?
I know. I was noticing that myself. Yeah. What's
Did he
up with the
Did he forget to take them out? Maybe he just
I don't know.
Forgot to take them out.
Yeah, maybe. And also, can we be superficial for a second? Come on, dude. Like, your tie is hanging out. You didn't really button it at the right place. I mean, I feel bad, actually. They should have checked his wardrobe before he went on. But that's the least problematic thing about it.
I'm just picturing him walking to the studio, talking to his agent on the phone, and he's like, I want to be on, I want a primetime show. I want a package deal. I want my own show. This is getting bullshit. I'm tired of doing these stupid spots with Chuck Todd. And he forgot to take out his earpiece as he went on the air with Chuck Todd.
Well, that's what he'd make a good weatherman.
Great weatherman. And it's funny, they're kind of like they're, you know how usually when you have analysts at the screen and they're touching the screen, like Steve Kornacki or John King of CNN, they're doing electoral analysis, like this county went blah blah blah, 55% Democrat in 2010. Now they're sort of like repackaging it for war analysis, and he's like can draw lines like the Russian, and maybe he's right. I don't know. But what I know is this guy was previously like his major hustle was being a Russian bot scaremonger. So
yeah,
I don't know.
And he has a weird. What is his handle? His handle is something like, what is it? It's meet the truth or know the truth or something. Hold on, what is it? It is selected wisdom.
Okay,
selected wisdom, and he of course is at the FPRI, which
Foreign
is
Policy Research
Foreign
Institute,
Policy Research Institute, yeah.
Where I believe Malcolm Nance, if you guys know Malcolm Nance,
friend of the show, come on the show,
who constantly calls Edward Snowden, Glenn Greenwald traitors.
Yeah.
He's also, I believe, he was or at least he was at that think tank as well, and also at MSNBC. They really have the best of the best at MSNBC.
Yeah.
But anyway, everybody give Selected Wisdom a follow. Let's all show them our support.
Yeah, show them our support. Yeah, tell them to come on the show. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got a question for you, Aaron. It's a super chat. Aaron, could you do some reporting on Bernie World Blob guys like Matt Duss basically running left guard defense for the US EU imperialist project? Wow, it hurts me.
I just saw a tweet from Matt Duss, who's Bernie Sanders' foreign policy advisor, saying that just praising Biden and his handling of Ukraine and saying that Biden's handling of Ukraine is what the progressive position on Ukraine should be. And that blew my mind. So flooding Ukraine with weapons, blocking diplomacy, dangling NATO membership, even though Biden knows he has no intention of actually fulfilling that. So basically using Ukrainians as cannon fodder. That's the progressive position. That blew my mind. And honestly, I think because I think that tweet is an example of why progressives are actually in such a weak position politically, because instead of challenging the Biden administration's warmongering, challenging their policies that I think pushed this the Ukraine and Russia into this war. At least Biden could have possibly Putin would have invaded no matter what. I have no idea, but certainly the Biden administration could have taken a lot of steps that could have avoided this war, including accepting Russia's proposal for neutrality in Ukraine, which will likely be a result of this war anyway. So it's also pointless. And instead of challenging that, Matt Duss is propping it up, and I think that speaks to why the progressives are in such a weak position, because it could be an opportunity for progressives to distinguish themselves, not just challenging war, but also standing up for average people who are going to be hurt by rising prices, inflation, and higher energy prices. And I think progressives are losing that opportunity as they've been known to do. It's too bad.
And guys, I just want to tell everyone to like this stream and also share it on social media. Like right now, everyone should know about what's happening. And by which I mean not just the news, but when I say what's happening, I mean the fact that Monday morning is happening. And through coming to Monday morning, they learn about what's happening in the real world. Yeah. All right. Should we go to the next? Speaking of learning about what's happening in the real world, wow. Should we go to the next clip?
Let's do it.
All right. This one, I believe you're playing.
Oh, okay.
Is it? Oh, no. It's my turn again. Sorry about that. Okay. So let's go to we're going to go to an ambassador.
I'll set it up. So Linda Thomas Greenfield, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, was on State of the Union with Jake Tapper on CNN, and now she's talking about this new phase of the Ukraine war, where basically both sides, U.S. and Russia, are accusing the other of plotting false flag chemical attacks. It's like an internet chat room has carried over to the world stage, where everyone's accusing the other of false flags. It's crazy and very dangerous. And it's interesting to note that these false flag chemical weapons allegations from both sides only started happening after that awkward appearance of Victoria Nuland before the Senate, where she was asked if Ukraine has chemical or biological weapons, and she didn't give a direct answer. She instead said that Ukraine has biological labs, and she's concerned about those falling into Russian hands. And whatever is going on there, afterwards, immediately, both sides are accusing the other of plotting chemical weapons, false flags. And it's just it's so dangerous that the world's two top nuclear powers are accusing the other of such serious things. But that's where we're at.
Without evidence, right?
Without evidence, absolutely. Yeah.
The U.S., NATO, and Ukraine have all been warning about a possible Russian false flag operation that they would use to justify using chemical weapons in Ukraine. What does the latest intelligence suggest about how likely that might be, and how might the U.S. retaliate if the Russians use chemical weapons in Ukraine?
Jake, as you know, the Russians came to the Security Council on Friday with the spurious accusations that the U.S. was supporting Ukraine's chemical weapons programs. And I'm not going to give that any more amplification here. What we see happening is, again, this is a false flag effort by the Russians. They are advancing what they might intend to do. We've seen it happen before. They are the ones who've used chemical weapons. They use them in Syria. They've used chemical weapons against their own people. And we are concerned that they may use chemical weapons in Ukraine. We've been clear, if they escalate to this level, we will respond aggressively to what they are doing. You've seen the consequences so far of our actions against Russia and against Putin, and they are feeling those consequences, and they will feel more if they take this unfortunate decision to use chemical weapons.
So what the U.S. is basically doing here is they're recycling the playbook that they established in Syria, where Obama very stupidly blurted out one day that for him, a red line would mean chemical weapons use. Right. By either side in Syria, by the way, by either the government or the insurgents fighting the government. And as one former U.S. ambassador to the Middle East, to a Middle Eastern country, told Charles Glass of Harper's Magazine in 2019, the red line was an open invitation to a false flag. Because if you're the insurgents battling the Syrian government, and the only hope you have of victory is basically U.S. military intervention, and the U.S. says that the only way in which will military intervene is if there's a chemical weapons attack, then you have every incentive to conduct a false flag that you can falsely pin on the Syrian government. And if you're in the Syrian government, the only reason for you to carry out a chemical attack would be if you, for some reason, want the U.S. government to militarily intervene against you. So it would be crazy for Syria to do it. And in 2013, a chemical attack did happen in Ghouta, a suburb of Damascus. Hundreds of people were killed with sarin. It was blamed immediately on the Syrian government. That's what Obama publicly said. And ultimately, though, Obama pulled back and he did not enforce his red line. And there was this agreement reached between the U.S. and Russia to destroy Syria's chemical weapons stockpile. And Obama and his officials said that the reason they didn't strike Syria is because of this agreement, that was the compromise. But we actually learned later on from the reporting of Seymour Hersh that there was ample intelligence inside the Obama administration that Obama was personally briefed about, pointing to actually that chemical attack being committed by the insurgents. And the intelligence was so dire and so strong against the allegation that Syria did it, that even some Obama
But the Syrian government did it.
Yeah, the Syrian government did it. That even some Obama administration officials at the time, when Obama was trying to drum up support for bombing Syria, some Obama administration officials leaked claims to the media that actually the intelligence blaming Syria was not a slam dunk. And that was a deliberate reference to Iraq WMDs, because it was George Tenet of the CIA who told George Bush that the intelligence that Iraq had WMDs was a slam dunk. So there were responsible people inside the Obama White House undermining their colleagues who were trying to use this as a pretext to attack Syria. And so they're basically, people inside the Biden administration are recycling the same playbook now. They want, I suppose, the option of military intervention in Syria, in Ukraine. So now they're putting out this new red line, or they're floating these allegations as a possibility, and the media is going along with it. Nobody is mentioning that, for example, when the UN ambassador says that Russia used chemical weapons in Syria, it wasn't even Russia accused of doing it. It was Russia's ally, Syria. And no one, of course, can mention all the reporting that's come out from Seymour Hersh, the leaks from Obama administration officials, and later on from the OPCW, all of which undermined the allegations against Syria. You just can't mention that, because once you mention it, you have to look at the evidence that's there, and the evidence that's there totally undermines the narrative that Russia and Syria were guilty of chemical attacks at Syria. But amazingly, they're just going along with the exact same playbook, because there are obviously some people inside the Biden administration that want to preserve the option of using military force.
Right. And if you say that, also, not only do you have to look at evidence, but then you are an Assadist.
Yes. Well, as you know, Katie, my common reply to that is, if you support these evidence-free allegations that are undermined by bodies of evidence, the reporting of Seymour Hersh, and then later on the OPCW whistleblowers in a subsequent case, and you're supporting these allegations that are used to manufacture consent for bombing Syria and sanctioning Syria, if you call me an Assadist for looking at that evidence, then I call you a sadist.
Sadist, yeah, which is much more apt.
Yes.
And the evidence actually supports that, as opposed to the other one, which is a smear.
Mhm.
Okay, so moving on to the next clip, and this is with the this is your YouTube
Okay.
clip.
Yes.
So you can set that up technologically. I'll set it up substantively. This is with Chris Murphy, a Democrat from the state of Connecticut, and he's on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd.
And let's hit it.
Let's hit it.
Do we have to get to the uncomfortable position that Putin may remain in power, get a piece of Ukraine, and we get a peace deal and Zelensky stays in power? That's an uncomfortable potential result, but it feels as if peace talks are at all serious, we could land in that sort of uncomfortable zone.
So peace talks are always uncomfortable. And
Katie, how many times did you hear the word uncomfortable there?
So many times that it made me uncomfortable. Chuck Todd is really uncomfortable.
Chuck Todd says uncomfortable there 3 times.
I mean, Chuck Todd is saying he's uncomfortable with peace.
That's exactly what he's saying. Here, let's watch it again. It made me laugh so hard. Let's watch it again.
Targeting civilians also increase.
Do we have to get to the uncomfortable position that Putin may remain in power, get a piece of Ukraine, and we get a peace deal and Zelensky stays in power? That's an uncomfortable potential result, but it feels as if peace talks are at all serious, we could land in that sort of uncomfortable zone.
So peace talks are always uncomfortable. And this is a terrible position that Zelensky is in, because
if I was Chuck Todd's life coach, he's got such an obvious issue with projecting his own inner discomfort onto his show. So I would work with him on, like, what other words can we use, Chuck, instead of uncomfortable,
right,
to describe your discomfort with peace? Because obviously that's really what he's uncomfortable with, as you said. Right. He's uncomfortable with the prospect of peace that includes Vladimir Putin, because Putin has to be regime changed, I guess.
Yeah. He's triggered by peace.
He sees what's happening. The Russians right now do not have a path to get to Kyiv. What you see is they are taking up defensive positions. There's news overnight, in fact, that the Ukrainians have made advances in and around Kyiv. And so this assault into the cities, this targeting of civilians is going to get worse, increasing the pressure on President Zelensky to get a peace deal. Listen, Stoltenberg is right. This is ultimately up to President Zelensky as to the terms of this agreement. But if President Zelensky makes the choice to reject these claims of annexation, the United States people will be with them. The United States will stand with Ukraine if that is a bottom line for the Ukrainian government. I think neutrality is on the table. I think sort of increased devolution of power to some of these eastern regions should be on the table. Annexation will be a very tough hill.
You know what he's saying there is the proposals that were on the table for the last 7 years, which Russia publicly at least supported, neutrality for Ukraine and having increased autonomy for the Donbass, these rebel regions fighting the Ukrainian government. Now he's saying that's on the table. If it's on the table now, why couldn't it have been on the table before the invasion and thus avoiding the war?
Right.
You know, because those were Russia's key demands, essentially make Ukraine neutral or keep Ukraine neutral. So it's not a part of any bloc. So it can't join a hostile military alliance on Russia's borders, and then give increased autonomy to the Donbass, which was the terms of the Minsk agreement, which was reached in 2015, and which Kiev had refused to implement. But now Chris Murphy is talking like that all that's on the table. And by the way, I mean, it also speaks to how just influential the U.S. is, the fact that it's Chris Murphy saying what's on the table for Ukraine. I thought he just said that it's up to Zelensky.
Yeah,
but now he's saying this is on the table.
Right. I thought Ukraine had agency.
Yeah.
But really, he said the quiet part out loud. But also, it's almost as if, Aaron, and the point you made, it suggests that it's almost like the U.S. wasn't prioritizing diplomacy above all.
They certainly were not. No, they were not. They were not.
Very responsible.
It's not responsible at all. It makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, it makes me very uncomfortable. Yeah. And Ukrainians and Russians. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill for Zelensky to swallow, and the United States is going to support him in whatever decision he makes.
Are we going to let Putin back into the world order, even incrementally, if there is some sort of ceasefire? I mean, the answer probably, look, if Zelensky negotiates this week, we may have to. How does that work? Is he going to be less of a pariah than, say, Fidel Castro was for 50 years?
But listen,
we control the world order, so we decide who gets to come and who doesn't.
Yeah.
Even
it's almost like Chuck Todd is. Oh, keep going. Sorry.
No,
it's almost like Chuck Todd is being like trying to figure out if some guy who's kind of like a current misfit is going to be back in the cool kids club because he wants to know how to talk about him.
Yeah.
And like he wants to know if he's going to come back and then he's going to be embarrassed and have egg on his face.
Vlad's been banned from the lunch table for the last 3 weeks. Are we going to let him back at the end of the lunch table? Or is he permanently off the lunch table?
Yeah. Is he? Yeah.
He was in the world order because we allowed for our allies and the United States to be dependent on the products that he produced. So, no, we should not allow Vladimir Putin back into the world order, but we should also be wise to the fact that this is the moment to make the United States, Europe, the rest of the world independent of the product that Russia makes, oil and gas. And if we don't do that, then you will ultimately be forced to keep him at the table.
President Biden.
At the table.
At the cool kids table.
Yeah. And that's why we have to turn to democracy-loving allies such as Saudi Arabia to produce even more oil, because they're welcome at the table right now because we need them again. The whole thing about treating them as a pariah that Biden said on the campaign trail, or the whole thing about them committing mass murder in Yemen. Yeah, we got to let that slide.
Aaron, when you're talking about good and evil, you need to leave room for ambiguities because of when you're on the side of actual good, there's evil, and there's another kind of evil.
There's somewhat less evil, yeah.
There's somewhat less evil. Anyway, whatever.
Whatever.
I guess.
Week.
Yeah. I guess. Yeah. What was it?
Yeah.
I guess. Anyway, I guess.
Anyway. Yeah. That was Chuck Todd last week, everybody. If you missed last week's Monday morning, where Chuck Todd dropped that nugget of wisdom on us.
Yeah.
And it was so funny.
And also, of course, you and I would disagree with the United States assessment of Venezuela, but somehow they changed a lot lately. They were they were the uncool kid. Like Maduro was also a misfit, and now he's at the cool kids table.
Yeah, Maduro wasn't even the president anymore. The president was a guy named Juan Guaido, who nobody voted for, and few people in Venezuela had ever even heard of. And all of a sudden, because Donald Trump and John Bolton and Mike Pompeo decided it, Juan Guaido was the president, and Nancy Pelosi was giving him a standing ovation until we needed his oil, his country's oil, and now all of a sudden, President Maduro, the real president of Venezuela, is the president again, and now U.S. officials are meeting with him and begging him for his oil.
Right. He was like the homecoming, like Juan Guaido was the homecoming king, and then he got his crown taken back.
He did,
and it was put on Maduro.
Yeah. And Juan Guaido had a freak out. He was really upset. He couldn't believe that the U.S. would even consider removing sanctions on his country. Imagine cheering for sanctions on your own country because you know that's the only way you'll ever have any shot of becoming the installed fake president, is if your people suffer enough where finally they give in and let you take over. It's so disgusting.
Biden called Vladimir Putin a war criminal this week. There are a lot of people that agree with that assessment, but question whether the president himself should have personalized it. Where are you in this?
Well, I don't think you can do anything other than call Vladimir Putin a war criminal. He is. I mean, what he is doing right now, as we speak, targeting children, maternity wards, schools inside Ukraine, clearly crosses a line. And what we're seeing is
we're going to negotiate with a war criminal.
Yeah, but what we've seen.
I mean, that is what's difficult here, right? We didn't negotiate with Milosevic.
Well, listen, this is ultimately a.
Yeah, I love the U.S. calling out war crimes after the invasion of
bombing civilians,
Iraq, Libya, occupying Syria, where they destroyed an entire city like Raqqa when it was occupied by the Islamic State. And by the way, Chris Murphy, after pretending for a bit that he was against the Saudi war in Yemen, he recently, a few months ago, voted for a new weapons sale to Saudi Arabia. That's how much he's committed to stopping war crimes against civilians and bombing civilians, is arming Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I mean, but it's defensive when Biden does it. It's defensive weapons. It's characterized as that because this was not a change in policy as much as it was a rebranding. But what did he just say? This whole thing about like not negotiating. You know, he's Milosevic, he's Hitler, and this whole idea of like not negotiating with someone because you don't like them. You don't negotiate with friends. You negotiate with enemies. Or you negotiate with people who are frenemies. But the idea that you have to really like someone to negotiate with them is ridiculous. And of course, like it or not, the guy has nuclear weapons. So what are you going to do?
Yeah. And the fact is, I mean, it speaks to how integral the U.S. is to this whole thing, that for a while, Putin didn't even want to negotiate with Zelensky. He just wanted to negotiate with the U.S. because the Russian claim was that Zelensky ultimately does what the U.S. says.
Right.
And so if the U.S. doesn't want to negotiate, it's very difficult to reach an agreement, because the Russian point of view, at least, is that whatever Zelensky does needs the blessing and the approval of the U.S.
Right.
All right. Should we hear more from Chris Murphy?
Yeah, we got to hear a little bit more. Yeah.
Decision that Zelensky is going to make. But listen, this is a moment where we need to come together in Washington around President Biden. President Biden is showing moral leadership, just like President Zelensky is showing moral leadership. I got a lot of Republican colleagues right now who are using their time to criticize President Biden, to vote against Ukraine aid on the floor of the House and the Senate. Well, President Biden is standing up there saying and doing the right thing. So I'm proud of President Biden for drawing a moral line against Vladimir Putin. I'd rather have my Republican colleagues supporting him rather than attacking him.
Well, I mean, that's true. There are some Republicans also who are attacking Joe Biden for, in their view, not doing enough to arm Ukraine, that he's been insufficiently militaristic.
Right.
Which is a reminder that there's people even crazier than Chris Murphy and his Democratic hawk allies. There's also the Republican hawks who are arguably even crazier.
Right.
First times you and I talked publicly about Ukraine was during the first President Trump impeachment. One of your traveling companions frequently was Ron Johnson. He said something interesting this week that I wanted to get your reaction to. He said, I personally think if Trump had met with Zelensky, never would have made the phone call. I think those two would have hit it off beautifully, and none of this would have ever happened. It's kind of interesting how would history have changed based on that one decision not to meet with President Zelensky. This was part of the holding this aid hostage. He snubbed Zelensky in a meeting in Poland and sent Vice President Pence there. This seems to be Senator Johnson admitting that the situation in Ukraine would be different had Trump handled it different. Is he right? You agree with him?
Listen, we lost 4 years of.
They can't stop talking about Trump.
Yeah, I know.
It's somehow Trump's fault that Russia invaded Ukraine on Biden's watch.
Yeah. Why did Trump make him do that?
Cooperation. Had Ukraine not been a political poker chip during the Trump administration, we could have been
As opposed to
increasing our
now.
level of military commitment to Ukraine.
The U.S. did
Right.
increase its military commitment to Ukraine under Trump because Trump came in and he saw that Obama had refused to send more weapons to Ukraine because Obama, after helping to start a proxy war in 2014 by backing a coup, by the way, which Chris Murphy played a big role in, he went to Ukraine and met with the Maidan protesters and met with even a fascist, outright fascist, and stood with him and posed with him, who was a major part of the Maidan protest leadership. After Obama was a part of all that, he's like, I don't want to fuel this anymore, and I don't want to arm neo-Nazis. So Obama did not send he did not send the weapons that people like Chris Murphy and Joe Biden and Jake Sullivan wanted him to send. Trump came into office, and he has no principles, and he's being called a Russian puppet. So sure, he immediately wanted to show how he's tougher than Obama, and he sent those weapons. And then he briefly paused them, and that helped get him impeached. And but somehow Chris Murphy wants to pretend as if that somehow enabled Putin to invade, and that it was Trump using Ukraine as a political pawn, which is true. But the problem is, not only was Trump doing that, but the entire bipartisan foreign policy establishment was. Because as Adam Schiff said, the U.S. aids Ukraine so that we can fight Russia over there and not over here. So essentially, we're using Ukraine to fight Russia. That's the definition of a political pawn, using Ukrainians as cannon fodder for a suicidal proxy war against Russia.
Right. Okay, let's keep going with this one.
I don't know if I can sit here today and say that things would have been different. I think ultimately, President Putin wanted to control Ukraine, and he was going to stop at nothing in order to bring it back into Russian orbit. And so, yes, I think Ukraine would be in a better position to defend itself today had Trump not played games during those 4 years. But I'm not sure that anything was going to stop Vladimir Putin from moving troops into Ukraine.
Except for a negotiated solution that was on offer by Russia for a long time, including neutrality for Ukraine and respecting the Minsk Accords in the Donbass, except for that part, which Chris Murphy leaves out.
Everything was on the table except for diplomacy.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And again, you know, this whole thing that Russia wants to bring Ukraine into its orbit. I mean, look, you can make that case. They are trying to do that now with their invasion. But the thing that started this, I think, is not Russia trying to bring Ukraine into its orbit. It's the U.S. starting with the coup in 2014, trying to bring Ukraine into its orbit and refusing to let Ukraine exist as a divided country that it is, where you have people who want to be in the West and those who want to have close ties with Russia. And it was the U.S. and its allies with the Maidan coup of 2014 that essentially forced Ukraine to make a choice. And it's that effort by the U.S. and Europe that I think has brought us to where we're at today.
Right.
But that's the background that we're not allowed to mention.
Right. Okay.
Is that enough, Chris Murphy? Or
no, we got to get to Iran.
The Iran. Okay.
Right time to do the Iran deal.
Is this the right time to
There's
do the Iran
no choice but to do the Iran deal. I mean,
can you trust the Russians? I mean, this is a case where we have to. We're working with the Russians on this. It seems like an awkward time to do that.
Cut the Russians out. I mean, you don't need the
awkward.
Russians, right? The material that was being removed from Iran on the original nuclear deal went to Russia. There are other countries that can take it. You ultimately don't need the blessing of the UN to get this deal done. You think it's bad to have Russia as a nuclear power invading a sovereign neighboring country. Imagine what happens if Iran is a nuclear power. The rest of the Middle East will...
So you're good with doing this if we find a way to keep Russia out of the deal. You'd keep them completely out of the deal.
Chuck is so nervous that Russia's going to come back, and he's going to have to face
allow
Putin
Iran to
calling him
obtain a nuclear
criminal,
weapon.
so.
That sets off a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. And I don't understand why my Republican colleagues, having watched what Vladimir Putin can get away with nuclear weapons, want to hand nuclear weapons to the Iranians.
All right, Senator Chris Murphy.
Thank you.
From Connecticut. Good to see you.
Awkward, uncomfortable. Chuck is using... Look, it's almost like he heard you, Aaron. You're his life coach. You said you're saying uncomfortable too much. So what does he do? He starts talking about awkward. Well, let's watch another clip of Chuck Todd kind of summarizing where we are. And in case you missed what his take on Putin is, he makes it plain here. So here's his morning intro.
And a good Sunday morning. With much of their advance stalled, Russian forces continue to turn their guns and missiles on civilians. In recent days, they've hit a theater that was clearly identified as filled with children. Hundreds remain unaccounted for. Russians have bombed apartment buildings in city after city to spread terror, even targeting bread lines and food storage facilities with the clear intention of starving the populace into submission. These are civilian attacks. They're not accidents. Overnight, Russia bombed an art school in Mariupol. 400 people had been hiding there. President Biden has gone to the extraordinary step of calling Vladimir Putin a war criminal. And on Friday, the White House says Mr. Biden warned China's President Xi Jinping of significant repercussions if China decides to aid Russia either financially or militarily. But Vladimir Putin now apparently accepts that Volodymyr Zelensky is the leader of the Ukrainian people and will remain so even after this war. It's a big concession, but he's still refusing to meet with Zelensky one-on-one, at least for now. So does Putin even want a peace deal, or does he want to flatten Ukraine so nobody can have it?
Aaron, does he even want a peace deal?
Yeah, no, he just wants to flatten Ukraine. That's, yeah.
So no one can have it. If I can't have you, then no one can.
Yeah. It's such a cartoon. By the way, the allegations he puts out, for example, about the theater in Mariupol, it's very difficult to accept these claims on faith without some more evidence. All we've seen so far when it comes to that theater are photographs put out by the Azov Battalion, a neo-Nazi militia. No video, no talk even yet of casualties. And this came after another claim from the Azov Battalion in Mariupol that accusing Russia of bombing the Turkish mosque in Mariupol. That turned out to be totally false. So immediately after that, they pivot to claiming that Russia bombed this theater. Maybe Russia did, I don't know, but the evidence for it so far is not there. And there's plenty of evidence, I think, that calls the allegation into doubt, including that it came just as Zelensky was appearing before Congress and pleading for a no-fly zone.
Right.
And so why would Russia choose to bomb a theater full of sheltering children at the exact moment when there's growing calls for more intervention, for a no-fly zone? It doesn't make sense to me, but we'll see. We'll see what the evidence is, but certainly
a lot of fog of war.
It's just amazing how any allegation like this gets repeated as fact without acknowledging that there's evidence calling it into question. And there's even been video of people escaping Mariupol, telling a much different story than what we've heard so far.
Right.
So, you know, it's fog of war. It's hard to know exactly what's going on, but you just have to be skeptical of all these claims.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. We got our next clip, and thanks again for bearing with us because we are sans Wilson right now. Let's see. We got let's go. We got to get some Richard Engel, obviously. So let me just set that up.
And it's uncomfortable, everybody. We know it's uncomfortable without producer Wilson here today. So thank you for.
We appreciate you for hanging in.
Thank you for sitting in your discomfort and our discomfort because we're uncomfortable not having Wilson here to guide us. It's a challenge.
1 second. Let me just close the other Twitter things I have open so that doesn't confuse them. By them, I mean StreamYard.
By the way, this has been a Chuck Todd heavy show today. We've gone 40
It has
minutes,
been, but don't worry. We have some more. We did show some Jake Tapper.
Oh, we saw Jake Tapper. That's
yeah,
right.
and we're gonna have Margaret soon. Marge.
All your favorites, everybody, are going to be
faves.
here. You know, all the faves. We got Jake, Margaret.
Oops.
No Stelter this week, I don't think, though, unfortunately.
No, it's true, actually.
Although, you know what's funny? Apparently this week on a show. So this week, the New York Times confirmed, guess what, Katie? That Hunter Biden's laptop actually isn't Russian disinformation. Did you know that? Isn't that crazy?
I did hear that.
Yeah. And the Times decided to acknowledge that this week. And apparently on Brian Stelter's show, he didn't see that as being worthy of discussion after he took part in dismissing the Hunter laptop story as Russian disinformation.
He refuses to be a pawn of Russian disinformation, regardless of whether it's Russian disinformation.
Exactly. Yeah, he's taking a stand.
Yeah, he's taking a stand.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
More Chuckster. Okay.
With our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel. And Richard, it seems as if this week, this was the week that Russia amped up missile strikes. Are they no longer trying to use a ground invasion to take over Kyiv?
Here in Kyiv, the mood has changed significantly. People are coming out onto the streets. They're feeling much more confident, but everything in this city feels like it's in a bit of suspended reality. Nobody is working. The economy has more or less stopped. Nobody's paying taxes. People aren't making plans for the future. They're just making weapons in their homes while the Russian offensive is paused. But the expectation is that
Weapons
Russia
in
is
their
just
homes,
refitting, rearming, regrouping, and that it plans to hit this city and other cities with even more ferocity as it brings in heavier weapons. And Russia is already starting to use heavier weapons. It used the hypersonic missile, which caught a lot of people's attention. But the concern here is that it could bring in its heavy artillery pieces that would do the most damage. And this is typical Russian military operating procedure. When it hits a wall, it brings in bigger hammers to smash through that wall. But here in Kyiv, for the time being, they are seeing something of a respite and also using this time to refit and stock up on supplies.
So if it's possible that Putin has decided maybe he can't get Kyiv and he wants to at least keep what he has or try to, make some incremental gains in the south and east, what do these peace talks look like? And who's now the best mediator?
Okay, this is the interesting, relevant part.
Turkey is emerging far and away as the clearest mediator with President Erdogan. He has a relationship with President Putin. He's a NATO member, so he's trusted by both sides. But he has also had strained relations with the United States, which could help.
Turkey's not what? Sorry.
Turkey's hot right now. It reminds me of
Hot.
that.
It's hot, yeah.
From Zoolander, when the Will Ferrell character is like, he's hot right now. So Turkey's hot right now.
Yeah.
Him with Putin, so he's clearly emerged as the interlocutor, and so far what Turkey is saying is that Putin and Russia do seem to be willing to make some sort of deal that it would involve denazification, whatever that means, potentially just a generic statement from Ukraine that it rejects all forms of extremism, that it would involve neutrality, which President Zelensky has already more or less agreed to, that he won't join NATO, but it could also involve territorial concessions, particularly in the south, particularly around Mariupol. And that, so far, seems to be the biggest sticking point.
And that might be a bridge too far for Zelensky right now. Richard Engel in Kyiv for us. Richard, thank you.
So I like that he says he doesn't know what denazification will look like, which, here, hold on, let me just play this again.
Neutrality, which President Zelensky, United States, which could help him with Putin. So he's clearly emerged as the interlocutor. And so far, what Turkey is saying is that Putin and Russia do seem to be willing to make some sort of deal that it would involve denazification, whatever that means, potentially just a generic statement from Ukraine that it rejects all forms of extremism, that it would involve neutrality, which...
So he doesn't seem to know what denazification means, which we could have told you that a couple weeks ago when he had a segment featuring the insignia of the Azov Battalion.
Yeah, Richard Engel took part, as we talked about, in a media stunt by the neo-Nazi paramilitary militia, the Azov Battalion, put it on the air. So he knows exactly what denazification would mean. If he's since learned who the Azov Battalion is.
Right, we don't know, Aaron. It's not clear. That would have required learning. We tried to educate him.
We tried to tell him. We tweeted at him. We did that segment to tell him that he was taking part in a neo-Nazi media stunt. And the demand from Russia is that militias like the Azov Battalion be dissolved and no longer welcomed into the armed forces. So that's a very concrete demand, because Ukraine is the only country in the world which formally has incorporated neo-Nazi militias inside of its military. And people might not know that now, because now outlets like the New York Times have gone from calling Azov Battalion for many years now openly neo-Nazi to now, when the Times writes about them now, they call Azov far right. So somehow Azov's gone through some sensitivity training with the U.S. in the intervening years that have downgraded it from neo-Nazi to far right.
Yeah, they definitely did diversity training. That's what it is. It's not that it's no longer politically expedient to call them neo-Nazis, given that we are also arming them.
Exactly. Now, Katie, I have to acknowledge something uncomfortable. I got very uncomfortable during that clip. Did you notice when they went to Vladimir Putin when he was giving that speech in the stadium?
Yes.
Did you see what he was wearing?
A turtleneck and a parka?
Yeah, a turtleneck. And do we recall what you were wearing earlier this
Last
week
week,
in an
you
episode
know
of
what?
Useful Idiots?
I mean, I cannot believe you're saying that because right now
Are you
I'm
wearing
wearing a mock.
Oh my
It's a
God.
mock turtleneck. A
it's a
mock
mock turtleneck.
turtleneck. Yeah. Here. Let's see.
Well,
It's true, but you know what? If people watched last week's, I did a costume change. It's almost as if I knew I was going to be caught. I was going to be
Mhm.
well, because Vlad told me he wear turtleneck next media appearance, so I had to uncover my neck. I was going to say cover my ass, which looked like uncovering my neck. Yeah, it's true. He did wear that. He did really look like. I'm sorry, I'm going to get canceled. This is stereotypical and problematic. He really looked like an ice skating coach, though.
He does look like an ice skating coach. Yeah.
That
Yeah,
outfit was
that's a
very
good point.
ice skating
Yeah.
coach. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, come on. Don't. What are you doing, Vlad? Have some Russian self-respect. All right. Okay. Oh, red. Someone pointed out I'm wearing a red turtleneck. You know what? To be fair, I am wearing. It's more of an orange, but I will tell you. I'm not saying that to cover my ass. It is more of a. It's like a rust almost. But definitely reads on screen as red. So I'm not gonna lie. And that's all that matters. So for all intents and purposes, it is red. Okay. So let's go to our next clip. We're gonna hear from Margaret. By the way, at Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan is a retired Irish dancer. I think that means Irish step dancer, I think. Uh-oh, and look at what color she's wearing. That's in her Twitter bio. I'm not like unnecessarily bringing that up. She chooses to elevate that. Okay, hold on a second.
When you're a dancer, I mean, do you ever really retire?
It's true. It's like being president. You never
aren't you sort of like an eternal dancer no matter
you are.
I'm never retiring from dancing. I'll say that right now.
From which kind? Just like you never retired from being a child actor.
Yeah, exactly. I've not retired from child acting. I still hope to get in some commercials one day again, selling toys.
Yeah.
Like I used to, and I'm also not retiring from dancing.
War profiteer. Yeah. Okay. Oh, we got a question in euros. Why can't the state mandate on local media coverage and investigation by any news network? We thought people only like 5-minute videos, but isn't Joe Rogan the top YouTube account? We are told what people need or want without question. We're going to have to, yeah. Good question. I'm not sure I understand it, but it's that sometimes the best questions are the ones that you struggle to understand.
Yeah, because they're so smart, you don't understand them.
Yeah, exactly. They make you uncomfortable.
Yeah. Great question. I don't get it, but it's a great question and it's so great because I don't get it, which means it's so smart. So
right, yeah. So thanks, Giordano Franchetti. It's a very cool name.
Let me clarify one thing, Katie.
Something. Yeah.
Talking about the theater in Mariupol, it was definitely bombed. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Right.
Bombed. So I want to be clear in what I'm saying there. I'm just not convinced that Russia did it. Russia, by the way, says that they didn't carry out any strikes in that area on Mariupol, which, if that's wrong, I think that should be easy to prove. So I'm just saying, everyone, Russia may have done it. It's possible, but don't accept claims without getting evidence, especially coming from a place that's right now controlled by the Azov battalion, which has every incentive to fudge the truth.
Right. And is also calling for a no strike zone. A no fly zone.
Yeah.
And also, we didn't really get into this, but it is interesting to note that Biden is calling Putin a war criminal. And as I believe we brought this up last week, that the ambassador who we showed earlier on this episode had to modify her comments condemning cluster bombs.
That's right. That's a great point.
It's really awkward because
so she called out Russia's alleged cluster munitions use in Ukraine. And then when they put the transcript up on the UN mission website, they had to correct it. They had to erase the cluster part because the U.S. has used cluster munitions too.
Yeah. And Huai Danny, Mate's 80s era Wheaties spot on Aleppo TV is fire.
That was a great spot. I'm very proud of that spot.
Yeah. If you tried to if you thought you'd shame him about that, you're dead wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Around the world. One that's gotten increasingly familiar is that of the defiant images from the war in Ukraine continue to dominate hearts and minds around the world. One that's gotten increasingly familiar is that of the defiant and besieged president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, encouraging Ukrainians, lobbying for help, and pleading with Putin to stop. Last week, Zelensky took his message to Canada, to the U.S. Congress, and plans to address the people of Israel today. Saturday, he spoke to Switzerland, a country that stayed neutral in World War II, but was one of the first to condemn the Russian invasion and express support for Ukraine. Translated in English, he said, "It is impossible to stay away from the fact that in the 21st century, in the heart of Europe, hundreds of rockets and bombs are flying at peaceful cities. It is impossible to stay away when the army of the world's largest state, albeit only in size, directs all its deadly potential to destroy us, to destroy hospitals, ordinary schools, churches, universities, maternity hospitals, residential areas. It is impossible to be indifferent when children are killed. The role of a journalist is to find facts and report the truth, and above all, stay fair and neutral. But much like Switzerland, we find ourselves agreeing with Volodymyr Zelensky that some facts are so horrific that equivalency is both false and morally wrong. Above all else, it is most important to be truthful. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington.
What does that mean? That sentence that she says,
and morally wrong.
Hold on.
Above all, Volodymyr Zelensky, that some facts are so horrific that equivalency is both false and morally wrong.
Some facts are so horrific that equivalency is what? And morally wrong?
Mm-hmm.
I wrote it out here. Both false and morally wrong. What is she even talking about?
Yeah. How can a fact be false? Isn't some facts are more? Wait, let's hear it again.
Okay, yeah. Hold on. It's the equivalency that's
above all, stay fair and neutral. But much like Switzerland, children are killed. The role of a journalist is to find facts and report the truth, and above all, stay fair and neutral. But much like Switzerland, we find ourselves agreeing with Volodymyr Zelensky that some facts are so horrific that equivalency is both false and morally wrong.
Equivalency is both false and morally wrong. But she's also saying neutrality. I think she's thinking that she can use equivalency as if it's interchangeable with neutrality.
I think she's calling out people who dare point out the hypocrisy of the U.S. in condemning war crimes because the U.S. constantly commits war. I think that's what she's
Maybe
getting.
that's it. I thought she was saying, or looking at what Russia is doing and looking at what Ukraine is doing. I thought that was like
yes.
looking at the crimes committed by Ukrainians.
Right. That could be it as well.
Yeah. Which would explain why they haven't done that at all. And explain why she's literally, we find ourselves agreeing with Zelensky. I mean, that's kind of it. That's what they're doing through all their reporting is repeating his talking points.
Yeah. And that's why it's funny. She says it's important to always be truthful, except for when it undermines U.S. propaganda.
Right.
In which case, we have to just repeat U.S. propaganda.
Right. But somehow that's because if we don't do that, we're engaging in false equivalency.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't really understand. This is like kind of like that question. It's so smart that we don't understand it.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 I think she's just buying. She's just kind of like trying to not buy time. She's trying to incorporate a bias into her coverage by pretending that suggesting that a rejection of said bias would be wrong. The role of a journalist is to find facts and report the truth, and above all, stay fair and neutral. Some facts are so horrific that equivalency is both false and morally wrong.
Yeah, it's like your job is to stay neutral, but in this case, Russia is so bad guy that to stay neutral here would be really taking the side of the bad guy. And so that's why we have to take the side of Volodymyr Zelensky. By the way, and Zelensky's a hero. Why? Because he's essentially let his country be used by the U.S. as cannon fodder. And it's sad. We talked about
You're not
this.
supposed to say that.
He ran on a peace platform. There was so much excitement when he won because he was an outsider. He was a genuine outsider. He ran on a campaign of peace. He got a huge mandate, 70%. He said he was going to take political risks to make peace with with the rebels in the east and end the war in the Donbass, which has been going on for 8 years. Something that shows like Face the Nation never acknowledged that, contrary to what the narrative says, this country was not peaceful before Russia invaded. It was at war, and 14,000 people died, heavily fueled by the U.S., which sent over billions of dollars worth of weapons to use Ukraine as cannon fodder against Russia. And but you can't acknowledge that war, and you also can't acknowledge the people in the Donbass who suffered through that war for the last 8 years. And you have to pretend as if all this is just like Vladimir Putin woke up one day and decided to invade Ukraine for no reason.
Right. So yeah, I think you're right. So she's covering her ass and collective media ass. Aaron is Mr. 13 FNG says Aaron is right. She's saying the people that have been complaining about the double standards, i.e., Syria, Yemen, Palestine, all need to shut the fuck up. Just talk about Ukraine only. Yeah, and what she's saying applies to that, and it does also apply to, well, what about the ethnic Russians or Russian-speaking people who have been killed? So don't bring that up because it's not compatible with what Zelensky is saying. And we need to be Team Z, not Team P. World War Z. Just thought of that. Yeah. Well, all right. This has been great. I think we learned a lot. We're gonna go over to Colin right now, and again, we will see you next week. So we'll have a new show for you today. This week, excuse me. We're gonna have that. We're unpaywalling an interview with Oliver Stone. And again, Oliver Stone is very relevant today because the documentary that he produced, Ukraine on Fire, was indeed banned by YouTube, removed by YouTube, and now it's up on Rumble. So this is a great interview that Matt Taibbi and I did with him in December. So see you on Colin. Okay.
And don't forget, before you go, to hit that like button, everybody.
Yes, hit the like button now. Yes. Yeah.
Help us overcome the powers that be who want to
the algorithm.
Yeah, who want to keep Monday morning from you.
Yeah, they want to hide it from you. Yeah. And thanks so much again to everyone for tuning in. And we will see you at Colin. Bye.